So today's conversation is about good news and bad news. It's about taking the journey from unhooking ourselves from the bad news and the addiction to the bad news cycle and tapping into the good news. It's about not missing what is in front of us all the time, knowing that there is so much good happening in the world, that there is so much good happening in life. But when we are hyper focused on the negative, on the bad news, we can miss it. We can sink down that rabbit hole and miss what is right in front of us. So are you ready to explore unhooking the bad news and turning up the good news, or moving from bad news to good moods? Are you ready? So in her book, Embracing Uncertainty, Susan Jeffers poses some ideas for us. She says there is a desperate need for creating drama out of the drab that hopefully will keep us watching the news, the television, the reporting. She says reports on the evening news go from one nightmare story to the next, and we can now get 24 hours a day of disaster on our 24-hour news channel. We should congratulate ourselves that we have the courage to walk out the door. She says this in the time that is not the time that we're experiencing right now. It's not in the middle of a pandemic. It's not in the middle of one of the most controversial political climates that we've seen in recent history. And she still points out that the news and the reporting can suck you into a negative rabbit hole. She says that we need to move from fear-based, fear-motivated messages. Amen? To move away from fear-based, fear-motivated messages. Now, that doesn't mean to apply metaphysical malpractice when we see someone processing reasonable amount of fear or anxiety around something, but it's the drama, right? It's the magnifying the bad. It's multiplying it through the power of the mind. And it is wise to heed her advice when she says, refuse to give up your power and find the good news. Are you ready to refuse to give up your power and find the good news? So what do you focus on? What do you focus on? What has your time? What has your attention? And what has your mind? What do you focus on with the news? What do you focus on in your phone calls and your conversations? What do you focus on with social media posts? What do you focus on in your Christmas cards if you're getting ready to write them? How about your video clips and your snapshots? You know, I was with a friend and taking pictures of my little one, and I remember this moment where I took a picture, and you know, in the kind of movements back and forth and moods, the picture was this just crying, not happy picture. And I took it and I went to delete it. And he said, wait, don't delete that. Save that. That's reality. You got to save some of everything. You want to remember all of it, not just the good parts. Now, that seems to be a contrary message to today's conversation, doesn't it? Because we're talking about moving from the bad news into the good news. But what if there is an even deeper exploration to be experienced here? So I have an opinion poll to put out to you today. Do you notice that your brain is funny when you observe the outer world? Does it have some critical thoughts, some judgments? Tune in for a moment to what bugs you more. What bugs you more? Does it bug you more if someone looks too happy? Or does it bug you more if someone seems too drab or sad or negative? What irks you more? We often see things on social media and in our environment where we see relationship boasts right before they burst. We see marriage boasts right before marriage dissolutions. We often see Christmas cards that are full of the most wondrous things in the midst of what we know is an experience of a year of suffering. We have conversations that go around and around sometimes about the same thing. Stuck in negativity, stuck in discord, stuck in grief, stuck in drama or bad news or storytelling. What bugs you more, the brag or the drag? The brag or the drag? It's something to think about with our mind, because I think that practices that create mindfulness are not so much about shoving out one thing, right? Don't look at the bad news, only look at the good news. They are often more about having mindfulness and balance around things. I suspect that it's beyond one or the other, that it's not really the brag or the drag that drives the mind crazy oftentimes. It's overdoing anything. It's overdoing anything. It's dramatizing anything. It's making something into something of biblical proportions. It is being out of balance or out of authenticity or out of reality, I think, that drives our minds a little nuts. I think we are craving authenticity. We are craving a balanced sense of reality. Like the news, I don't think it's really that we can't handle the bad news. We can handle a lot. But what we can't handle is drama and spin and exaggeration and a bunch of graphics made to make us go, oh, right? But what we can handle is reality. What we can handle is things that are not drastically distorted or out of proportion to reality. What we can handle is informed information, purposeful information, information that we can act on, information that we can take steps towards healing, information that can allow us to shift, both in conversations and community and connection and relationships, and in the media and the news. It's not wise to keep engaging or listening to something or someone or some station that continually exacerbates the art of complaining or the art of negativity. That's actually enabling, isn't it? That actually just feeds the cycle. If there is no progress, there is no movement, it's not about presencing or listening to something, that actually ends up encouraging being stuck. And we don't have a lot of endurance, I think, for the hamster wheel. The hamster wheel, unless we're in it. When we're in it, we have an incredible amount of endurance. When it's coming from us, we can sometimes have 20, 30, 40 years of endurance for the hamster wheel. But when it's in our external environment, we don't have a lot of patience for it. We have a low endurance for it. And that's not so bad if it's low, because we don't want to be stuck on the hamster wheel. But what is at risk? What do we miss? What do we miss if we turn our minds off? What do we miss if we're not willing to presence any of it? If we just close our eyes to anything negative and say, I just can't see that. Or if we want to become myopic and only look at the positive and we say, this will have all of my attention and my focus. What do we miss? My sister, who is incredibly intelligent, has been sharing quite a bit of good seasoned information, vetted information on social media. And I remember this recent post that she did. It was quite a serious post and it had great information for everyone to have. And so as a lawyer and as a writer, she is very versed at putting things together. So she put together this eloquently and powerfully written piece on social media. And then with it came a big picture of a fluffy puppy. And she wrote the whole thing, and at the end she goes, and here's a cute puppy. Knowing that our minds can only endure so much, knowing that with the salty you need the sweet, knowing that that might attract some people's eyes that would otherwise go, I can't even take one more thing. So what is at risk if we don't have mindfulness and balance? If we don't have mindfulness and balance, then we are at risk of turning off and tuning out when we need to be tuning in and tuning up. We are at risk of missing the participation in our world that is so critical, missing being the one that is there in the conversation, being the one that is in action, being the one that is co-creating a world that works for all. We also can fall into the trap of denial or avoidance with our own feelings, our own emotions, our own triggers, or what happens in the world. What is at risk is that we might fail to hear something or someone that needs to be heard desperately. We might be so oversaturated in negativity that we don't notice the difference between someone just spinning around on a hamster wheel to milk it, and someone who is on the brink of suicide. Mindfulness and a spiritual practice helps us to the best of our ability weed through all of that so that we can be where we are guided to be, so that we can show up when we are guided to show up, so we can hear what we are guided to hear, learn what we are guided to learn, help where we are guided to help, and serve where we are guided to serve. It's important that we are informed but not saturated, without spin, without drama. Kind of like, I was thinking about it like the World Wildlife Federation. I get their mailings, and I also contribute to them as part of my giving. And they do an amazing job. They do an amazing job of balancing. They are dealing with some of the most critical issues that are facing our environment, some of the saddest and most depressing bits of news and information and science. Yet they deliver it in a way that has balance. You don't open something from the World Wildlife Fund and just go into a 3-day depression coma. Well, you might if you read all the little details and focus in and follow up on them. But generally, you have the beauty of what inspires you. You have the calendar or the wrapping paper or the stickers or the pictures of the polar bears. You have the beauty and the motivation. You have the why. And you have the action. You have what is being done. And that is balanced with the bad news. That's balanced with the harm or what's going on that we are trying to stop or prevent. It's not good to give in to the news that has no solution, that invites us just to sit there and soak in the discord. We need action. When people are inspired, they feel like they have an impact. When that happens, they are unstoppable. When that happens, they are luminaries. When that happens, they are the light of the world. One of Susan Jeffers' propositions in embracing uncertainty, and I think this is the best news of the bad news, is that she says that the winner of the worst offender of this bad news spreading, the worst offender department, she said, the award goes to the bad news in our mind. The award goes to the bad news in our mind. Why is that good news? Why is it good news that the worst offender is the mind itself? Unity author Sig Paulson says this: all too often, we try to solve our problems in much the same manner. We pull out our mental, emotional, and physical guns and try to shoot the villain in our lives, but nothing really happens because the source of the villainy is not out there on the screen. It is in the reel of pictures that is put into the projector. If we really want to change the outer picture, we must change the real. If we really want to change the outer picture, we must change the real. The idea is that there can be things going on outside all the time. There can be things going on in the news, things going on with our loved ones, things going on with ourselves. And all of that we can't really control. But what we can show up for in a powerful way is our own minds. The pictures that our minds hold on to and say over and over again. So when we're healing, when we're moving from the bad news to good moods, it's important to have a deep, deep, deep sense of inquiry and reflection, and what Susan Jeffers calls an intense training period. An intense training period. So I invite you to take a moment for reflection. Reflect on any energy drains, any spaces in your life where there may be drama or overindulgence in the negative. It could even be the negative that comes from too much positive, but the negative. Is there one event, one relationship, one disappointment, one activity that continually drains you? Are there places where you see what Susan Jeffers calls danger ahead? Places where, because of your past, your history, your programming, you look at an area of life, work, finance, relationship, love, environment, you look at that area and you overlook the good and you look almost for the bad. You see that danger ahead sign. And when you lean into that field of life, whether it be relationship or work, whatever it is, politics, whatever, when you look at it and when you lean into it, all you see is danger ahead. There is a danger in only seeing danger ahead. Because there is resistance. There's resistance to go there. There's resistance to get involved. And there is an invitation and an opportunity for healing. The invitation that Susan Jeffers gives us is to turn all of the negative what ifs about danger ahead. What if I get in a relationship and this and that and this and that? What if with my finances, this happens and that happens and this happens? And to turn it into a game of shape-shifting it and start talking about what if the positive. What if the positive? To bring it into balance, to bring it towards neutral, or possibly bring it into the positive. So what are the areas that you know, or the relationships or the circumstances, and maybe it's a one-time occurrence, that drain you? Where are the areas in life where you see danger ahead, where you have a pre-programming to overlook the good? To focus on the negative. And where might you be taking your negative experiences or negative emotions or negative rabbit hole out on your physical body? There is a mind, body, spirit connection. It's important to understand that the thoughts in our minds frame how we show up for ourselves, how we show up in our world, and how we express through our body. I want to share with you a few pieces of the writing in Embracing Uncertainty. She says, good news in the mind creates good news in our bodies. Bad news in the mind creates bad news in our bodies. Some of us are more aware of this than others. Some of us can directly have experiences and feel it immediately in their bodies. Some of us are not quite connected. It's hard to go, if someone asks you when you have an emotional experience, where do you feel that in your body? Some of us, it's hard to go, where do I feel that in my body? I don't know. I feel it in my head. My head is having resentments. My head is having criticisms. My head is having this. But where do you feel it in your body? She says most of us assume that negative thinking only affects our mental health. which is important enough. After all, it does rob us of our enjoyment of life. What we don't fully realize is how much our negative thinking also affects our physical health. We don't fully understand that bad news in our heads can create our stiff necks, stomach aches, headaches, and over time, much worse. Our muscles tense, our stomachs churned. Can you feel it? I don't even like reading it. I'm like, when I'm reading it. Our immune system is compromised with the emergencies created by the thoughts in our head. We react physically to mental stress. Whether it's from an argument, whether it's from the news, we react to physical stress. She talks about how it's long bouts of bad news that we need to address, how we have incredible endurance for bad news and for the balance of life. We do. Our bodies are made for this. Our bodies are made for healing. Our bodies are made to transmute energy. Our bodies are not programmed to store negative emotions. But it takes practicing spiritual principles. It takes breath work. It takes awareness. It takes mindfulness, especially in our crowded and chaotic culture, to slow down enough to develop a practice around our physical bodies and our physical wellness. She says, when we're in denial, the pain doesn't go away. It just festers within our bodies. So this is why we don't focus only on the good or only on the bad, or completely resist the bad and completely only want the good. She says, when we bring the pain to the surface, our body rejoices. When we enter the healing land of tears and when we feel the release, you can see how holding up a huge wall of denial would be detrimental to both the body and the mind, exhausting. She goes on to say, in a bad news world, we are taught to avoid pain at all costs. This is a side note, but the body is often the padding for the pain. When we are called to up our spiritual practice, our meditation, our support network, our support system, our spiritual nourishment, when we're called to up it, or it is not as high as it could be to meet the circumstances of the pain or the suffering or the thoughts that we are living with and in, the body is often the protective gear, the protective armor that pads us, that protects us so that we can keep going without shutting down. Can you feel that? Can you really feel that? Can you feel that so deeply that it almost brings you to tears, honoring this body temple that is hosting your sweet spirit? How gracious it is. How amazing it is. How kind and compassionate it is to say, let me hold on to that for you if it's too much right now. You know, we know even from stories and studies of abuse, we know the power of the mind to break things down, to store them up and to shut them away so that people can't even remember. That's an incredibly intelligent creation, the body and the mind. Can we honor it for its gift? And when we have the resources, when we have the spiritual tenacity, when we have the resilience and the power, when we are grounded and when we are centered, can we say to this sweet body temple, I am listening now. I am here now. You can let go. You can give it over. You can give it up. I am not alone. I'm in my centered state. I am in my centered self. I am in my spiritual self. It is not I, but the greatness, the allness, the unity consciousness, the God self, the God creation, the source of all being that does the work. I am centered in that now. It is safe now to open the door, to let it go, to lift it up, to release. She goes on to say that we are taught to avoid pain at all costs. We are taught that pain is dysfunctional. It isn't dysfunctional at all. It is a rich part of life that can ultimately bring us many good things. The importance around the bad news is to have a practice with it. Now, in her book, Embracing Uncertainty, Susan Jeffers gives a few tools on how to be present to something without digesting it, without ingesting it, and without storing it. It's important to create a spiritual practice that works for each one of us, and to keep trying on new things, to keep asking other people or reading or meditating and intuiting new practices and new methods. One of mine that someone reminded me of at our Love and Wellness, we have a weekly Zoom call that's Love and Wellness. And someone shared something that has been a practice of mine since I awoke to these principles of body, mind, wellness. And it is this, that I say to my body, I am no longer willing to take this out on my body. I am no longer willing to listen through my body or to take this out on my body. I am listening now. I am hearing now. It is safe. It's like inner child work. Like, you wouldn't throw something huge on a child, but when it's a child or a pain body trying to solve something, trying to present something, it's too much. But if you can step into your adult self, into your spiritual self, your centered self, your self that knows that life is not destroyed, it is not just not created and then destroyed, it just is existent. Yourself that knows that you are not separate from a concept of God, that you are one with all Godness. Yourself that knows that you are eternal life expressing itself, that what happens to this body doesn't have any bearing on what happens to your spirit, your soul. It's the self that won't engage in metaphysical malpractice and say, well, if that's true and I'm taking this out on my body, then how awful must I be to have created this awful thing that I can't seem to get rid of? No, that's not what it does. It presences. It heals with compassion, and only the person experiencing something knows what that healing looks like. That healing sometimes looks like physical healing, but much greater than physical healing is the spiritual healing. And as scripture has told us, when there have been inquiries into why is this pain existent? Why is this condition existent? Why is this existent? It's not always the same answer. Sometimes it's for the person. Sometimes it's for the glory of God. Sometimes it's something that is to be healed right here and right now. Spirit never sits in judgment. But we're here to take a deep dive. We're here to be in inquiry. We're here to be in an intense period of training the mind to align with the spirit, the body to be honored with the mind and the spirit for the amazing work and ability that it has. So this mind-body connection is real and it matters. When someone continually feels abandoned or berated or unsupported, alone, misunderstood, it's difficult to be in an environment like that and bring in the healing. It takes a great level of mental fortitude, a great vigilance of the mind to create a temple and to create a full sense of wholeness that is not shifted by outer experiences, outer news, bad energy that is experienced in that way. The mind-body connection. Can we even just simply use the affirmation, I am listening now? I am listening now. You have my attention. Show me. heal me at depth, and to trust with faith, which Charles Filmer said is the perceiving power of the mind linked with the ability to shape substance. With faith, trust that you will be guided. Trust that the healing on whatever level, mind, body, spirit, soul, whatever level the healing is to come to you, that it is being revealed. I recently have been engaging in a practice. You know, it's funny. I think when we are open to being taught, there is always something more for us to learn. And one of the things for me, I have some back pain. I'm careful about how I say things. Just, it hurts sometimes back there. It hurts sometimes. And I have a friend who's been sharing some videos with me. And of course, I know about our principles. I know about New Thought Principles. I know about our practice. I know about the mind-body connection. I know about affirmations. I know about my own affirmations that I choose not to take things out of my body. And this friend has been diagnosing me from time to time. And whenever I feel it, they go, "You've got this, you've got that." But I got some great videos on pain and back pain specifically. And it really connected something for me that was a disconnect before. So I'm going to offer this to you on the chance that it might serve. So one of the practices in healing work is to ask yourself, where do I feel that in my body? So it's to go into a meditation space, and whether or not you've been in an argument with a loved one or you saw something that bothered you, whenever you have a mental or emotional reaction to something, to just stop all the outer stimulation and to go within. When you go within, you engage in a practice where you follow it, right? It's like contact tracing. You find out, where was the contact in my body? Like, where did that hit? Now, some people are great at this. I have a theory that it's maybe the artists that are great at this, but they can go, "Oh, I feel that in my chest or my back," or, "Oh, I feel it here or there." That's always been very, very difficult for me to, and then the next part of the practice is you allow that part to speak, to be heard. And then you may ask it what it needs. And then you may let it know that you're there, that it no longer needs to be acting out, because you as an adult, you as a spiritual practitioner, you as a Christ conscious self are there, right? But if you can't get to those later stages, if you can't feel it somewhere in your body, right? And anyone that teaches yoga has probably noticed that yoga or any sort of physical movement activity, that people can sometimes, when they move in a certain way, or a massage therapist, you can go to a spot that just triggers a flood of emotions, right? Something that is like, well, that didn't happen from me just rubbing your shoulder, boom. But if you can't get in tune with it in the first place, you're kind of stuck. And that's often been my experience, that when I've been either doing with myself or someone else, I'm kind of like making it up. I'm going like, maybe I feel it in my, I don't know, like maybe I'm trying to use my imagination and think about it, because my experience is not that I can go straight to it. But this made the difference. I was watching this video about back pain. And this guy had terrible, terrible back pain, but he's making this video and he's cycling, and he was told by the doctors that he just essentially would not have a mobile life. And this man is now riding a bike and doing a video, and he can move well, and he's just incredible. And there was a follow-up video with another person. It was all about this one technique. But the link for me was somehow, in watching the video, the way he was explaining it. And you've got to know, and trust me on this, I have read and read and read and heard and heard and heard and learned and learned and learned, but I've never made this connection. Whatever he said invited me in to having the experience of what I was experiencing without an object to project it onto. So if there is discord, if there's something that happened that made me have an emotional experience, made me angry, sad, whatever it is, what happens for me is I go inward and I try to feel it in my body, but all I can do is think about it. And I can think about, okay, well, here are the patterns, which is another method of healing. Here are the patterns. I'm having resentment about that. There are a lot of times in my life I've been abandoned. So that goes back to childhood. But you know what I mean? I can go and I can trace it. I'm really good at that mental picture, almost like really good at psychology, right? But that only goes so far. It's not like a kinetic full body experience. But whatever was said in the video, I recognized that my invitation was to go within and watch how my mind is tracing and creating stories, and to say to myself, what is this without an object? What is this without something to project it to? So what am I feeling if I can't make someone wrong? If I can't make something at fault? If whatever is out there, I can't trace it to out there, then what am I feeling? Where is that feeling? And just being with that. And it took the practice, and it pulled all the energy and the processing from going out, you know, from being intellectual, and it brought it home to the physical. So some of us are really good at getting in tune with our bodies. And some of us are really good at being in tune with our mind and processing in different ways. So whichever one you find yourself in, and it may be different for different circumstances, flip-flop it. If it's so easy for you to just stop and not have an object for the discord, not say, oh, it was because of the news or whatever it is. If it's easy for you not to have an object to process your projections onto, then try having an object and trace your thoughts and learn more about your thoughts. If it's easy for you to do that and you know your thoughts very well, but you feel stuck in your healing work, try taking away all of the outer circumstances, all of the objects. So this happens, whatever it was for you. I go into the silence, I go within, and every time my mind tries to process it, I go, what is that without someone to blame? What is that without a story? What is that without an experience? What is that without going, this is why? Just what is it? What does it feel like? I am home to this experience. I am attending to it. It has my attention. We are here to recognize that the center of our power is not outside of ourselves. The center of our power and our healing and our wholeness is within. And that's the good news. The power is in your mind. We will never control the outer world, but we can master our inner being and our awareness of self, and applying spiritual practice and spiritual principles to the human condition. And that, friends, is healing. That creates a deep sense of wholeness. Susan Jeffers says, while we can't control the world around us, we can certainly learn how to respond to all things, yes, all things, in a health-affirming way. We have the power to create a life that feels good, rather than one that feels bad, despite the actual circumstances in our lives and in our world. So are we ready to take on the practice, to be vigilant with the mind, to engage in inquiry, and turn the camera from the outside world to our inner world for our wholeness, our healing, and our awakening? Namaste.